Hello and welcome to the U.S. Equestrian Open of Eventing Review Show. Today we're going to talk about the second qualifier in the series at Bouckaert Farm. I'm Annie Bishop and I'm delighted to be joined by Diarm Byrne and Sara Kozumplik, who was our big winner on the weekend. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Annie.
Hi, sorry. Apparently I've come with a soundtrack. I'm sorry. I'm at a jumping show.
That's a proper intro.
That is.
That was pretty funny.
We like music playing you in. That's perfect.
Apparently there was a clear round behind us. Yes. Hello, Annie. Hello, Jared.
Well, thank you guys for joining me. We're here to talk. Sara, you had an excellent weekend. Again, it was the second qualifier of the U.S. Equestrian Open Series. This time it was hosted at Bouckaert Farm. You and Dee had a chance to catch up on Friday evening after dressage and show jumping. It seemed like it was a great weekend overall. Obviously, you came out with the win, which is exciting. So congratulations on that. Would love to hear a little bit more about your weekend and sort of how Rocky came out of it.
Yes, he came out very, very well. He's feeling really good. And so good actually that I've decided to enter him in the next leg of this open series at TerraNova. But the weekend itself, I thought my dressage was okay. It wasn't great. It was a bit boring, to be completely honest. We can do a bit better test than that. But he was very good and very kind and very correct and accurate, but just a bit boring. Show jumping, I was delighted with him. Sorry, show jumping, I was delighted with him. He is not, that's his weakest phase by far. And he tried very, very hard. He had one down coming out of a double behind, but he really jumped very, very well. And I was delighted. I thought the course was a very good course. It was Mark Donovan's course, and it was influential over all parts of the track. And I think that that's very important. And honestly, I thought Rocky did a good job. Cross country, he was super. He was really, really good. The last water was the thing I was the most worried about because it had a really vertical rails going into it. And that's the sort of thing that I was a bit concerned. I had a few issues with him before, just with his jumping form over those. And I tell you what, Annie, it was the one bloody fence that I didn't see anything to, of course. And I rebalanced, I came around the turn there and I was like, this is the one I'm most scared about. And now I'm riding to nothing. But he jumped it super, was not phased at all. Like when he had to do that, and then 5 to a narrow in the water, and then another 5 out to an open corner. And he really nailed that. And I think for me, that was the biggest moment for him cross country. And then I did a little bit of hexing on Philip in the warm up, and so fortunately worked because he missed a jump. That's how crazy is that? Like, and that's why I always say, like, I missed one earlier in the year, and I had a kid that did the same thing, and her mom was like, how can she miss a fence? I'm like, listen, we all do it, right? We all do it. So I just got really lucky that happened with Philip. But honestly, Rock Phantom was super.
That's great. I mean, I know you all talked on Friday evening. Your plan was to not hang about. I know that the ground conditions, I've seen a lot of riders say that they worked really hard on getting the ground as good as it could be. But we have been in a drought here on the East Coast for quite some time. And so I know you said you went for it, but you didn't sort of go.
Yeah, I couldn't quite go as much as I had originally planned. But having said that, there are probably a couple places where I just should have been a little bit looser to my galloping fences, and that's on me. That's not to do with the ground. I could have been a little bit neater, a little bit looser. I mean, Philip, smooth is fast, right? Like, I watched Philip's round. I know he missed a jump, but it was all like really beautiful. Like, he for sure would have been. I mean, he would have had some time faults, but he for sure would have been quite close to the time. I think some of the other horses were less experienced. I think in my mind, I was a little bit concerned about the firmness, and it's not anyone's fault. It's just the way it was, right? And so for me, it just wasn't really worth it to go. I didn't go really slow, but it wasn't worth it to go incredibly fast at this particular event. But it's okay. It worked out, right? Like, I mean, it worked out. All's well that ends well.
Yeah, it's exciting. You are tied with Emily Bashir now at the top of the leaderboard of this series. And as you said, you're in at TerraNova, which we will be watching, which we get to watch, which we're very excited. There's a live stream for that. You went just quick enough because you were about 1.2 in front of Christina Henriksen, who was just behind you with her lovely horse. I think overall, Dee, did you, on paper, was there anything surprising from the weekend based on where dressage scores or jumping, their rates have been in the past at Bouckaert?
No, not really. I think it was fairly typical for Bouckaert Farm. I mean, maybe we would have gone a bit faster, like if we'd had more rain. But I think that was fairly typical of their style. The only thing that was a bit different is the cross country course design is different. Sorry about this announcer. The cross country course design was a bit different, and so maybe a little bit friendlier from that aspect. But I think the other things were quite consistent with how it usually is.
From my side, I think, I think from my side, the time penalties definitely played in. I think it's interesting in terms of, I mean, when you look at finishing scores here, and Sara's obviously won here with Rock Phantom previously back, last year. Last year when you won it, you finished on a score of 41. This year you're finishing on a score a little bit closer to 50. All three of the horses on the podium had 12 or 13 time penalties added. So I think that, that definitely did influence in terms of the overall finishing score. The big moment, Danny, is Philip. It's a huge moment. And if you go back and you look at, I mean, what's exciting about being able to follow the series in a little bit more detail and to get into each of these competitions and to be able to see, sometimes I think we're all guilty of it when there's so much going on. You sometimes just see the finishing scores and you see who won and who didn't win and you scan through them. And you don't really pick up on all the nuance and all of the excitement and all of the stories that sit within every leg. But you now go back to Morven Park and you had a dressage leader in Jenny Brannigan who had a pin cross country. You had an overnight leader in Hannah Sue Holberg at Morven Park who then had to withdraw. So you had three different leaders on 3 different days. Here you had Sara leading after the first phase. Then you had Philip taking over the lead. And then you have this big moment cross country, similar to Jenny Brannigan's moment where, it's kind of a freak happening and Philip's out. Why that really matters is because ultimately when we get to Morven Park and the journey to Morven Park for the final next autumn, all of that detail is going to be forgotten. All of the like hows around how those points happened, it's all going to be forgotten. All that people are really going to care about at the time is, did you get points on the board? And getting 40 points on the board really early, putting you into a joint lead of the series, and being able to potentially head to TerraNova with the opportunity to cement that. I mean, Rocky's now on, you talked about it on the Friday night show that we did, Sara, the journey back from an injury and the rehab associated with that. And I think that's a really important and cool story to capture. I know you texted me after being like, oh, I don't like how best to tell these stories, but I think it's so great and so real to be able to talk about like the actual journeys that horses have, particularly when you come back to Morven in a 3-star and you win. And actually, it's Christina the same one too. Exactly. It's the same one too. But now you go from you're now 2 wins in 3 weeks, and you've got a 2-week break, and then Rock Phantom heads to TerraNova. It's the first 3 events of the season, the first 3 events of the US Equestrian Open are capturing what I really hoped, but what you never know is going to happen on paper. You've got stories, you've got, what I mean is you don't know on paper if it's going to really play out that way, but you've got stories, you've got drama, you've got excitement, and you've got momentum from event to event. And if we can do that from 2 legs going into TerraNova, I think it really sets us up nicely next year for a real run of storytelling.
I think it definitely does. And I think the other really cool thing is that we'll be going back to some of these venues. So I think like the intel that riders got this past weekend at Bouckaert, they can use that 2 more times next year, because we go back to Bouckaert 2 more times within the series. And, it's a wonderful venue. And I also love too that we're going to all these different venues, because you can start to understand, not just follow the story of the horses and the riders, but you can start to understand how a venue evolves during the season, right? Like, this is probably a different Bouckaert because it's the end of the season where it is in the calendar. And then you'll go back in March, and that will be a different story as well, because horses will be at a different point in their careers. And so or sort of, in their sort of season. So I love that. We get to watch the Rocky story of coming from Morven in third. He's, just stepped up and had a great run at 4-star short after his neck surgery, which Sara thankfully has been really open about, because I do think that helps people understand all the things that go into this. And now, because she's got 40 points in the board, she's now going to TerraNova, which, Sara, I don't think that was your original plan, was to originally go to TerraNova, but you've got points on the board and you're going to go for it.
No, I am. And I think that's the exciting thing about this series, and one of the goals of this series, right? And I think it's, for me, I wasn't planning on doing that, because I was just planning on rehabbing him and seeing where I was and doing one 4-star short so that I had an idea, of what I needed to do. Then I was going to give him his break and come back and show jump in January. However, after this time, I thought, well, why wouldn't I go and do another 4-star short and try to get myself, a few more points on the board before some other people cop on to what's going on with this U.S. Open, right? And I think there's some opportunity here. And at the end of the day, it's another meter 30 show jumping for Rocky to jump on beautiful footing and beautiful course design. And I'm obviously quite, TerraNova is very near to my heart, being there from helping to develop it from the beginning. But I think that, like, for me, that'll be a really fun thing to go and do. And the other thing I decided, I thought about it a lot afterwards, and I decided, just because I am working without a map, really. The vets and I are kind of with sport horses of how this surgery, is how the proper rehabilitation and everything like that. And the horse is going really well. But I think from a confidence standpoint and from a strength standpoint and from a training and horsemanship standpoint, I think it actually makes more sense for me to focus on this series next year, rather than, he doesn't need another 4-star long to do a 5-star. He's done a few of them. However, I think it would be smarter for me to go ahead and focus on this series, still get to practice at that level, but not have to gallop for 10 minutes. And then say, okay, I get to October and I do a proper 4-star long at Morven. And if the horse is feeling really good at that, then I know I can go back to Kentucky in the spring. If he feels like that's a little hard for him, I'm okay with him being a 4-star short horse. He can go ahead and do these sort of things. Like, we're gonna know a lot more information, but from another year of doing this series. So for me, I know everybody's going to be trying to do this series for different reasons, and the money is awesome, right? But I also think it's a great thing. It's a great thing for developing younger horses. It's a great thing for developing younger riders and practicing under pressure. It's a great thing for the horses of ours that are going to be going down to an Olympic route. They might not be 5-star horses. They might be going more along an Olympic path than a world championship or whatever. Like, I just think that, I think that it's a very useful series from that standpoint. And I also think it's a great series for horses like Rocky, who I believe will go back and be a 5-star horse. But if he doesn't, he has this other option of being just as successful, enjoying the sport and having a great time. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I do think that's one of the really great things about the series. And I think something that we're going to really be able to follow, because you will have the Rocky who's like, okay, coming back from something, you're going to focus on that next year. I think the other interesting thing is, you say, we might have some older horses that are stepping down from 5-star, but they're not quite ready to sort of just be retired. And so the 4-star short might be that sweet spot for them, where they can still go out. We've seen riders do that with horses in the past, that they don't really want to be a 5-star, or they're ready to step down. The other cool thing that I think we're going to have a lot of fun tracking, we saw it a little bit this past weekend at Bouckaert with Christina Henriksen's horse, is we're going to watch this sort of next generation of horses step up. She was second to you in the 3-star at Morven Park. We've seen the horse do his first 4-star at Bouckaert. And so I think we will hopefully see that horse a lot next year in the series. And I think that's one of the really great things, is that we're going to be able to track them. So we're going to be able to see the superstars who are out there doing their thing, aiming for 5-stars, but we're also going to get to see this next generation coming through of who will be maybe our championship horses, you say, or the next sort of 5-star star. And I think that's a really exciting thing about the series.
Oh, for sure. When you talk about older horses, like it would have been a great thing. I mean, he's a little too old now to do it, but would have been a great thing for Rubens to sew. And I thought, and I started to do things like Devon with him because he loves the cross country. He does some smaller Grand Prix and show jumping and things like the Aiken Grand Prix and the Devon showcases and things like that. Like that's been something really fun for him. But this is something he could have done, and it would have been great to be able to have it. But I have to say, like, it's so forward thinking of the USCF to do this. It's something that unites us as a country and gives our horses more opportunities, our riders more opportunities, and our sponsors and owners more stuff to get behind.
Rubens is actually in the top 10 dressage scores and the top 10 finishing scores at Bouckaert. So, more and more course form continues to pile up. I think what I love about the conversation is I think it's totally right, and it's even reflected. Look, when you look at the Bouckaert podium, you can even see all of that age and different types of horses all reflected there. You look at Janelle Fleming with Ziggy, Sara, a horse very closely connected to you, and which creates another layer of the story. Ziggy previously, in a 5-star top 20 Sara at Kentucky for you guys, and I know yourself and Janelle have, you've been a great mentor, and she's been part of your program for some time. So, to have all of that, Annie, in terms of that mix that we're talking about, in terms of the horses that we're going to see in the series, and we know that there's firepower and more firepower coming for the top of the leaderboard. Like you had a little look this weekend at Philip Dutton.
Oh yeah.
But, then you go,
a lot of
no, I mean, we get to see him a tiny bit in terms of dueling this weekend, but you also know that there's what we saw in the 4-star at Kentucky last year in terms of all of a sudden you had at one point, now I know it didn't all happen, but at one point you had an Aachen winner and a Kentucky winner in Will Coleman and Tommy Smith with My Bomb, both lining up potentially. Then you had you ended up with 3 or 4, and then also you had Boyd and Will bringing his younger ones through with Diablo and Commando for Boyd. Diablo for Will, Commando for Boyd. But when you look at all of the firepower at 4-star level in the US, I think that is still, there's still loads more of that mix, I should say, going to be added in with some of the superstars that we've had. What I love about it, because I think that's the horse mix, what I love about it is when you talk to the USCF about the why of the series, it's this participation piece and this access to competition was one side of it. The other side was fans. The other side is, can you create stories and continuity and something that we can follow from event to event, that we don't just see our events as singular moments in a season and then the circus moves on to the next part and then on to the next part. Actually, can we create something that fans can follow? And I am sitting at home in a small town in Ireland on Saturday afternoon, and my family, who are totally non-equestrian family, nobody knows anything about horses. My family are sitting there. My sister's just had a new baby. The new baby's being shown around and everybody's looking at the new baby. And I'm stuck and I'm in a corner and I've got Washington International on one screen and Bouckaert on another screen. But I'm in and I'm waiting to see, and I'm looking for scores and I'm waiting to see what's happening. Annie, we were texting over the weekend, like we were looking at the live scores coming through, and it was like Philip's eliminated, Sarah's eliminated. Hang on, Sarah's not eliminated. We're constantly reacting.
I'm so glad I didn't see that, because my phone was blowing up, but I was on other horses. And so I saw it after the fact when it was all 5, and I was like, oh my gosh. Everyone's like, what happened? I'm like, I don't know.
This is sport.
That's the thing. Normally I would look at a Bouckaert, like I would normally look at the results, but I would look Saturday night or Sunday and sort of be like, okay, what happened? How did everyone shake out? But I was literally refreshing. Like, please give me a score, give me a time, give me a what's happening. And I think that's great. And, you talked about this with Emily Bashir, but like last night I was on Christina Henriksen's Facebook page. looking around at this horse and sort of seeing, what her story is more than I already knew. And that's great, because I think you're getting these people, we all know about Philip, and we know Boyd, and like in Will, and, those stories, and Sara, like those stories are sort of known in a lot of ways. I think the really fun thing is digging into these other stories we maybe just don't know as readily. And I think that that's one of the things that this series is going to do. And I love it. Like, I think it's such a great way a fan engagement. Like, I have new horse crushes. I have new people that I'm going to be fangirling, and I think that that is something that is so cool. And hopefully people really get behind it, because the other great thing is we can also like see or pay attention to venues that maybe you wouldn't pay attention to in the past, right? Like Bouckaert, probably people know it's in the calendar. It plays its part, and it's always, a good stepping stone for people either at the end of the season or the beginning of the season. We're going back to Bouckaert 2 more times. We're going to TerraNova in a few weeks, but then we go back to TerraNova next year. We've got Morven is the end, places in California that I haven't really maybe paid attention to as much, we will be tracking. And so I think it's just bringing together all the parts of our sport that make it so great. And really, I think USCF has been so genius in this, is just tying it together. And I know we keep talking about it, but I do think it's really important. And I think it's something that everyone should be paying attention to and being a fan of, because it is so great for our sport, and it's so great for these horses and riders to have these opportunities, and the venues to have these opportunities.
Yeah.
Because venues, we can't do our sport without venues. And so if these venues keep getting the entries and keep getting the support of the fans and of the horsemen, that's why our sport can happen.
You find yourself checking what happened in terms of the scores, but already, and I don't know if it's the same for you, Sara, as series leader, but if it's not, it will be very soon, which is I'm in TerraNova now. It's the last event of the year. There's entries coming. TerraNova entries are coming in. There's not too many, but like what is in is already being discussed in an office in Ireland. That's new. You sometimes need a concept. You need something like we talked about at the start, some reason to do it, because the stories have always been here, but you have to have a jumping off point. And now we have a reason for the three of us to be here on a weekday afternoon going through the podium at Bouckaert. We have a reason to be going checking TerraNova, who's entered. Top rated horses, by the way, 1, 2, 3 going into Bouckaert. Now, obviously, Juland is an exception with Philip in terms of the missed jump. However, that mishap aside, top rated horses became the 1, 2, 3 coming out. Like, from an Eck ratings point of view, we are constantly just looking at those TerraNova entries now, going, and already you're jumping through the phases as if they're not even going to happen, where you're going, okay, he's in, that's 40 points, she's in, that's probably 35, okay, how does this look? That's wild, but that is sport, and that is what they do for Super Bowl, and that's what they do for the draft, and that's what MLS does, that's what hockey does. This is where we want it to be, and I think, okay, it's going to take a little bit of time. We're only 2 legs into the first one. We still have 15 more, 16 more to go before Morven next year. From a USCF Equestrian Open point of view, there's still dressage, to come, and more announcements there around finals and qualifiers. There's still jumping, jumping to be announced in terms of the Open and what's going to happen from a jumping point of view. But 2 legs in, as I said, Annie, I think the excitement is feeling real to me, and like it'll take time for that to filter out, but it's a great feeling to start with.
Oh, I mean, it's exciting. So that actually is a great way to transition into TerraNova, which is November 13th through the 17th. We will have a live stream for that. So we'll all get to follow along and not just be frantically refreshing scores as we go. There's currently entries closed the other day, but there's currently 10 entries in the 4-star short for the qualifier, which is exciting.
They extended the entries for another week, so we might get 1 or 2 more.
I'll keep stalking entries.
Keep going.
Currently, there's 10 in, which is exciting. Sara, you're bringing Rocky back, which we talked about, which is exciting. So fingers crossed, you guys have a great run and you sort of end the year as the leader. But Philip Dutton is there with 2 horses currently entered as in Azure and Quasi Cool. So, I don't think he'll miss another fence. And so you can't take these two,
There's other things we can do to him, though. I mean, that was just one trick. We have other tricks.
So we
Philip,
can't.
if you're watching, you better watch your back, buddy. 'Cause, I'm not gonna count on outriding you. I'm gonna find other ways.
So we can't discount Philip. I think that's exciting. There's Jenny Darnstrom Dennis has 2 horses in. She had 1 in at Bouckaert, but she's got 2 horses in this weekend. And others are people that, as you look down the list, I think they have a chance to also, they may only have a couple horses in their string, but I think they will look at putting together a run next year. And maybe this is just their first one out. I do think it's going to be fascinating as we go through the series, especially this end of year time is so interesting to me because you're kind of, what are people setting up for next year? Like we know Emily Bashir has a different kind of, maybe she's not going to be chasing the series in 2025. But what are people setting up for? Like, is this 4-star going to be what they then, go to Kentucky off of? Like, what is the plan for 2025? And are people going to change their plans? Like Sara has just revealed she's changing her plan a bit. So I think that's what's going to be fun as we see each of these entries come in, is then all the wondering we will get to do as to what's happening for them next year.
I think from my side, Annie, the fact that, we talked about it just before, because again, the series leader is trying to protect her place as we go to the end of the year, and who'll be the first leader of the US Equestrian Open at at that first milestone mark, let's say, of the first 3 events down and the turn of the year. But of course, because the riders gather the points, but you do it over different horses, a 1-2 for Philip catapults him back up. So there's going to be but that doesn't necessarily, I mean, of course, riders with bigger strings are going to be able to attack different legs. But because of the spread of events, I mean, we were talking to you, Sara, about can Rubens make it? Can he come back? What else can we find?
I know. Can I dust out the old? They'll both be 20 next year. Dust out, grab Ziggy off Janelle like a heartless brat, and bring Rubens out. I mean, Rubens would actually enjoy it, but I think that's. I think maybe I should train up some other horses and plan for the future.
Yeah, that's probably the way. But the interesting bit is, I think it can change quickly. It's still wide open in terms of any rider. And we saw Mia Farley back at Morven in leg 1 had 2 horses in there. Like a rider who has a second horse and is able to have 2 horses in a 4-star at the same event. You're up to anywhere up to what that would be, 75 points potentially at certain venues. Sometimes more for a 1-2 at a very big 4-star short. So still wide open, obviously, after 2 legs, and still wide open to change it even within a single leg. But I'm still targeting, Annie, I think about 200 is the point that you need to be looking at.
If we still think 200 is right.
I think it's about right, but this girl only has 160 to find now, and I do think if you look at last year, Will Coleman would have come up with probably about 235, and actually Liz Halliday was somewhere in that region as well, in the kind of 220 mark. So I think it's not necessarily 200 going to win it, but I think 200 takes you probably into the deciding and probably into the prize money for the series, and gets you seriously into the conversation. So 160 points to find, and another 40 on offer, Sara, for Rock Phantom. Complete the hat trick, 3 in a row, 3 international runs, 3 international wins.
What you guys were talking about, though, with not knowing what everyone's plans are for the season, I mean, his plan is not to do a 4-star long or a 5-star long next spring. And so that means I can space it out a bit and show up at more of them, which is my plan.
I love it. I love that we already know we're going to be watching entries and waiting for the inside track as where you're going to go. It is, It is really exciting. And I love that we're getting to focus on venues that maybe people just wouldn't spend as much time talking about and thinking about and sort of targeting horses for. And so, um, again, I think as we, last thoughts on this, like I think Bouckaert was a great second leg. It's smaller. We didn't get to see it. Hopefully we'll get to see more of it next year. Again, we go back there a couple more times, which I think is going to be interesting. And I think as the numbers have shown, it's a tough place and it's hard to make the time. And, 4-star shorts generally are, but again, I think it will be really telling sort of how those ones play out. All eyes are going to turn to TerraNova next, as we've been saying, and I can't wait to see that live stream and follow along. Looks like a stunning venue, and again, really getting to highlight these different venues for people. And I know, Sarah, TerraNova is close to your heart, and we will be cheering you on.
Thank you.
Watching the live stream and refreshing scores and all of that. I really encourage people to follow US Equestrian Open on social media. Like, really, this is for the fans. And so I really encourage people to follow them, like them, engage with what USEF is doing for us as a sport, and for the fans, because that's why Sara does it. That's why, the love of the horses. And I think we all need to really follow in behind that. So, tune in soon, hopefully, for our TerraNova review, which will be exciting. And hopefully we get to chat with Sara again. But yeah, really looking forward to the rest of the series.
Thank you, guys. I'm excited too.
All right. Well, have a good afternoon, everyone.